Hello, thanks for joining us. Coming up, how Michael Jackson has earned more than Jay-Z, Taylor Swift and Kanye West combined since his death 5 years ago. It was a hard day's night when they played 40 back-to-back shows here in Paris in 1964. Unseen photos capture the Beatles winning over the French. And it's a hat trick. 3 ways to get your Brazilian World Cup culture fix right here in Paris. This week marks 5 years since the death of the King of Pop. During his life, Michael Jackson defined what it meant to be a superstar. Now he's changing the definition of what's possible for an entertainer to achieve after his passing. Since 2009, he's earned more than $100 million. Julia Seeger has more now on the singer who seems to be worth more dead than alive.
5 years after his death, his legacy lives on. Die-hard fans are still celebrating the memory of the King of Pop. Some have even dedicated their lives to their icon.
He's the king. He's the greatest entertainer that ever lived. If I can even be a glimpse of what Michael was, I'm set for life.
Michael Jackson's music did not stop with his death. Although the pop singer was struggling to avoid bankruptcy when he died, half a decade on, his financial fortunes are blooming. His estate's earned over $700 million in the last 5 years. This Is It, a movie compiling footage of his rehearsals, has been made. A 7-album deal has been signed, 2 of which already out. The latest, Escape, sold several million copies since May, but reviews are mixed.
He liked albums to be perfect, and whether or not Escape is perfect, I'll probably pass on that one.
It's really vintage Michael Jackson, songs that remind us of Thriller and The Wall. It's not like the first album they released with the most recent recordings of Michael. With this album, you can feel like it was recorded a while ago, even if it's been changed a bit by producers.
While the business side is going well, it's been a tough few years for his family because of the frenzy of legal action unleashed by his shock death. The biggest was the criminal trial of Conrad Murray, the doctor who gave him the clinical anesthetic for insomnia that killed him. Murray was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and spent 2 years behind bars. Then came the civil trial by Jackson's family. They sued tour promoters AEG Live, claiming the company negligently hired an incompetent doctor and drove Jackson to his death. A 3rd trial is still ongoing against Michael Jackson's estate. Choreographer Wade Jobson claims he was molested by the King of Pop at Neverland Ranch and is asking for $1 million. As for Jackson's 3 children, Michael Prince Jr., 17, Paris, 16, and Blanket, 12, they're doing their best to move forward with their lives. In an interview to The Sun, they say they want to continue to honor their late father's memory.
Well, now I want to transport you back in time 50 years to 1964 when the Beatles played 40 back-to-back shows at Paris's Olympia Theatre. It was during their stay here the band learned they'd achieved their first US #1 and where they wrote another I Feel Fine. Photographer Harry Benson was there to capture this defining period in the band's history. Half a century on, he's put his images on display, as Mark Thompson reports.
Intimate shots of Paul, John, George and Ringo captured just weeks before Beatlemania would take the US by storm. The Fab Four called this Four Seasons hotel in Paris their home for 3 weeks in January 1964. Now, photographer Harry Benson has made his shots from that time available to the public in the hotel's lobby. He says despite the playful nature of the images, the band wanted to be taken seriously.
John Lennon said, "Oh, we look childish and silly and stupid. We've got to be more mature." And they all agreed, yeah.
Although it seems unthinkable now, Benson says the Beatles didn't believe their popularity would last.
They were talking about lasting no more than 15 months. Ringo wanted to open a woman's hairdresser's shop. Yeah.
If there's anything that you want, if there's anything I can do.
The Beatles played 3 weeks of shows at the Olympia Theatre in Paris alongside 9 other acts. It would be the last time they'd play night after night in the same place anywhere in the world. And that wasn't the only coup the venue enjoyed.
This is the Beatles contract. It shows the frankly ridiculously small amounts they were charging in comparison to what it would be in the future.
The band was only paid £3,000 or around 1,500 euros to perform 40 shows, because the contract was signed 6 months in advance.
Well, of course, it was good. We had this contract with a group called the Beatles, but we decided we should put on a concert with them because, hey, you never know, they might not succeed at all.
The first crowds may have turned up to see home favourites like Sylvie Vartan, but by the end of their stay, after playing 8 days a week, the Beatles had won over Paris.
Something else that seems to be playing 8 days a week at the moment is the World Cup. Football fever has taken over. As our Paris-based culture team has been feeling a bit jealous of our France 24 colleagues over in Brazil, we decided to send our reporter Jade Barker out to find our own Brazil right here in the City of Light.
Sun, sand and sucker. They're as synonymous with Brazil as the Eiffel Tower is for Paris. But there's plenty more to the World Cup host nation than meets the eye. From capoeira to capoeira, we check out the tastes and sounds of this vibrant culture right here in Paris.
When you think of Brazil, books probably don't spring to mind. In fact, Brazilian literature has been a well-kept secret from the rest of the world for decades, despite spawning some of the greatest authors of the modern era.
Hello.
Hello.
One man who's long been in love with Brazilian writing is Michel Chendeng, who opened up the only Portuguese language bookshop in Paris.
So, Michel, who are some unmissable Brazilian authors?
It's hard to choose just a few books before going to Brazil and discovering it, but of course Jorge Amado is one of the most famous Brazilian authors. He wrote about the daily life in the city of Salvador da Bahia in his famous novel Captains of the Sands. It's the best introduction to Brazil. Barren Lives from Gracilio Ramos has just come out in French. It's one of the 5 major books in Brazilian literature. The action takes place in the Nordeste, a drought-hit area where many Brazilian literature masterpieces originated from. And to stay topical, here are another 2 books, Football in Brazil, an anthology of short stories written by young Brazilian writers, and The Poetry of Brazilian Football by Max de Carvalho, one of the best writers on this topic. Actually, all major Brazilian poets have written about football.
If a way to a man's heart is through his stomach, a way to get to know a country's culture is certainly through its cuisine. And there's no better place in Paris to get a taster of Brazil than Restaurant Gabriela. Let's go see the chef serving up. So Celso, you're the chef of Restaurant Gabriela. Firstly, can you explain a bit what's a typical ingredient in Brazilian food?
Yes, a typical Brazilian ingredient in our cuisine, we have black beans. We have also cassava. With cassava, we can make cassava flour. We can make cassava starch. We can have cassava sour starch. And with this, we can make the traditional plate that is named feijoada.
Brazilian food really is a mixture of all different cuisines. Can you explain how this came about?
Yes, actually, Brazilian food, Brazilian cuisine is very influenced by the Indians, Portuguese, Spanish, and we have also Japanese, Italian, so Brazil is a mix. And we have a national identity with the mix of the other countries.
And of course, at the moment, it's the World Cup taking place. Everyone's got their eyes on football. What's a typical meal that Brazilians would eat while they're watching the game?
I would say, of course, feijoada, because with feijoada, everybody do that. The aunts, our neighbors, our friends, they help us to do that because it takes a lot of time.
I think I'm ready to get into the kitchen. Thanks very much. Of course, Brazil's not just known for its gastronomy, it's also a country of movers and shakers, quite literally. And it's not just football that's got Brazilian feet tapping, nor samba, but put these two together, add a bit of music, and you almost get capoeira. Shakati, you're a teacher of capoeira here in Paris. You have some 350 students. Can anyone learn capoeira?
Yeah. I have almost 350 students, count with kids and adults and teenagers. And yeah, capoeira is for everyone. Everyone can play capoeira.
What exactly is capoeira? Where does it originate from?
So I will make short because it's a long history and very beautiful history. Capoeira, we say in Brazil that capoeira came with a pregnant woman and gave a birth in Brazil, the pregnant woman from Africa. And today capoeira win all over the world.
It really is a mixture of Brazilian and African cultures, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, to finish off our immersion of Brazilian culture here in Paris, would you mind giving us a demonstration of capoeira?
Yeah, of course, with pleasure. What?
And that brings us to the end of the show. Before we go, we'd like to share